Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to start by saying this meeting takes place in traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. So we'll start with the approval of the agenda, but are we going to see if Councillor Halverson is online? I think he was supposed to be, so we should maybe wait 2 seconds to see if we can beam him up. Okay, excellent. So we're good to proceed then. So we're going to start with the approval of the agenda. And before we approve the agenda, I'd like to add one thing to the agenda under item 6, presentations. Our town engineer, Tyson, is going to give a quick brief update on the flooding situation within the town the last little while and things like that. So I'd like to add that to the agenda if council is in agreement. Thank you. So I'll need a motion to approve the agenda with that addition. Moved by Councillor Bertle, second by Councillor Sanford. All those in favor? This one. Okay, and then we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the November 14th meeting. And anyone prepared? Get moved by Councillor Mosher, seconded by Councillor Duggan. So all those in favor? Motion carried. So now we move on to the public presentation session. We have one person presenting tonight. In public input and questions, you have 3 minutes. You have to state your name, and questions and comments are directed through me. So Michaela.
Can you hear me now? Yes. But I'm hold it. Good. Thank you, everybody, for letting me speak here this evening. My name is Michaela, and I'm actually speaking on behalf of Mickey's Pit Stop and Alex's Chill and Grill down on Victoria Road. It's very interesting that you want to add that to the agenda. I'm quite interested to hear what that update would be, because that's exactly what I want to talk about, is the flooding that's been happening in that area. I've had a full thing to shove into these 3 minutes, but I've decided to write a letter instead that I will submit to council, that you guys have a chance to read over our major concerns. But the major things that I would like to bring up would be the obvious impact that it's having on not only our business in terms of cleanup, shutting it down, but also the building structures themselves. Our investments are beginning to start to show their age, and they're only showing their age now because of the 200,000 liters of water that seems to rush in, no longer infrequent, but frequently. It's not a matter of if, but when. And so what I just want to basically touch on is that with the impacts that we have seen over the last year, there have been more major flooding events in that area in the last year than probably in the last 5 to 10 years. And my question is that with this group of council members in place, I bet you guys have seen more flooding in your tenure than any other member has seen in the past. And since it's been pushed down the line, everybody you speak to is like, oh, this has been a problem for years and it's going to cost lots and lots of money, but has been pushed down the line far enough now where businesses are being directly impacted. I mean, we've gained a new duck pond, which is great, I think, but I don't think any of us planned for that. But it's our investments. It's also the infrastructure in the area. The road is deteriorating. The blue buildings. I mean, look at the skate park that's in place right now. Everything is being flooded. The impact that it had last Thursday with the market being pushed back is major impact on people who attend the market, with those who actually are selling at the market during this busy time of year. Dropping my children off at school with the parking lot being closed was not just hectic, but incredibly dangerous. Traffic, people were very angry. It wasn't a very nice sight in that area of town. So I'm just wondering, has this been pushed down the road far enough where council hopefully can step in and mitigate, see what we can do to fix this?
Thank you, Michaela. I'll let Tyson take this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. As requested, I've compiled some notes on the flooding situations that we've experienced recently and just the storm drainage system in general. So recently, sections of our town's storm water system have been overwhelmed on 2 occasions during significant storm events. Thursday, as Michaela referred to, November 23rd, very early in the morning, extending to mid-morning. This mainly affected the Victoria Road area. And then Monday, November 27th, which was yesterday, mid-afternoon. And initially that affected most of town, with the lasting effects, again, more around the Victoria Road area. So both these events experienced overflows where the storm and or combined systems that we have became supercharged with rain and surface water over time, and as intensity of the storm rose as they prolonged. Many of our storm drainage systems also have a reliance on tidal conditions. So most of our outflows are into the harbour. So if tide's higher or rising, that has a negative impact on how much water we can discharge. Public Works thanks the people from and around Lunenburg for being cooperative and respectful when being directed away from areas or routes that they normally travel. And a definite positive for our community is that everyone has stayed safe during these significant storm events. Unfortunately, there are no quick or easy solutions to these problems that we're seeing. And some of the areas exposed in these flooding events have been this way for many years, which doesn't mean we just leave them, but they are challenging areas. So the town has or plans to perform the following studies to allow us to better understand, plan for, and then execute improvements to our storm system. So the first is the GIS wastewater modelling system that was completed in October of this year, which analysed our existing system in dry and wet conditions. It also projected for future development and provided us with recommendations for storm separation projects throughout our existing network. It is assumed at this time that these would need to be staged over an extended period of time with a cost in the order of magnitude between $1 and $5 million per project, depending on what part of town and the extent of the scope. The second one is included in the 23-24 capital budget, which is this current year. The condition assessment for the Tannery Road culvert running from Victoria Road to Tannery Road at the front harbour is underway as we speak. Staff identified this culvert as a critical component of the town's infrastructure due to the function it serves and the age of some of its components. The existing culvert runs through an easement from Victoria Road past the recreation facilities, past where Michaela's talked about as well. Past Blue Nose Academy, the old Wheelhouse Motel site, and the outlet is on Tannery Road. There are some challenges with this piece of infrastructure. The topography in this section of town is extremely flat and low. And the front harbour, as I mentioned earlier, is also exposed to those tidal impacts, which can affect discharge. Staff are looking to understand the existing condition to plan for any repairs or smaller replacements to maintain its current operation, but also plan for the longer term improvements for this infrastructure. Whether this is replacement with a larger pipe, duplication of the pipe, or another solution is unknown at this time. We're hoping for answers from the study. The cost of the condition assessment, including the future planning, is approximately $100,000, with the schedule and cost of implementing the repairs and long-term improvements yet to be determined. But likely to be significant. So the third component we have, which will be upcoming, pulling the curtain back here slightly maybe, is a recommendation for inclusion in the 24-25 capital budget. Will be a storm system master plan for the whole town. This study will provide a coordinated plan for existing storm infrastructure and future storm infrastructure installs, making sure the entire storm system is complementary for now and into the future. Cost for the master plan is estimated to be in the range of $100,000, and then the cost and schedule of the work is up in the air at the moment, obviously. So in terms of public works, we've also internally performed some smaller storm drainage improvements throughout the summer around town in areas where we've recognized. So examples of this would be the scour protection and drainage improvements on Shipyard Hill, the culvert replacement, improved ditching and swales along Centennial at the S turn, swales along Hill Street, Lincoln Street and Pelham Street, ditching along Dufferin Street and Churchill Street, shoulder reinstatement along Brook Street, ditching coming down the hill on Kissing Bridge, and cleaning out of catch basins periodically as per our routine. So the latest session of that was performed in early November, so not very long ago. So based on the items I've discussed, it's clear that both maintaining and improvements to the wastewater system and the storm system in particular remain a primary concern for the town now and moving into the future. If there are any questions, happy to address them.
Thank you, Tyson. I'd just like to start by thanking yourself and all staff these last 5 or 6 days. It's been very overwhelming and stressful, I think, for everybody. And from what I'm being told and what I've been seeing, you guys have all handled it like pros. So thank you very much. I know Thursday was very stressful with the farmers market. And then yesterday, I'm not sure what anyone could have done yesterday during that 1.5 or 2 hour period. But again, thank you very much from all of us. Is there any questions for Tyson? Okay, well, thank you very much, Tyson. We'll move on to the agenda. So there's no correspondence we deal with. So we do have some public hearings tonight. I assume that's why many of you are here. So we're going to get staff to provide an overview of each public hearing. Staff will answer questions from council. The meeting will be open to the public in person, and we do have one virtual, I think, presentation for one of them that we'll do after everybody in attendance presents. You're limited to 5 minutes. You must state your name, very similar to the opening one, and questions and comments are directed to me. And once the public hearing is deemed closed, there's no further questions or comments on the matter. And that's basically the rules. So we'll move down to basically 8.1. We'll start with that one. So Hillary.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the record, my name is Hillary Grant, Director of Community Development. It is my pleasure to start the public hearing portion of tonight's agenda by introducing item 8.1, the public hearing for the draft Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. Old Town Lunenburg, as you know, is a National Historic Site of Canada and a World Heritage Site. Legal protection of Old Town Lunenburg is a requirement of its World Heritage listing. The draft before you was reviewed by the town's Heritage Advisory Committee between May 29th, 2023 and September 13th, 2023. First reading of the draft took place October 10th. This public hearing was advertised in the Progress Bulletin October 18th and October 25th, as well as online. Letters were also sent to every property owner within the proposed district, including the transition area. The draft Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw has been prepared to protect Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District. This includes providing a ring of protection around Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site that includes entrances to the World Heritage Site. This ring of protection, the transition area in the draft plan and bylaw, includes Gallows Hill, Blockhouse Hill, and all of the UNESCO World Heritage Site buffer zone. The plan and bylaw are led by a new statement of significance for Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District and the principles of minimal intervention, compatibility, and legibility as outlined in the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada, Canada's federal and interprovincial and territorial standards for heritage conservation practice. Patricia Kell, then Executive Director, Cultural Heritage, Indigenous Affairs, and Cultural Heritage Directorate at Parks Canada, applauded the town for incorporating the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places, as well as the operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention into this draft. I sincerely appreciate the community time that has been put into preparing and reviewing this plan and bylaw, and will certainly do my best to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. So we'll open it up to people that want to speak. We'll just go in order of when you signed up. So the first is Linda Mills.
Hello, my name is Linda Mills. I live at 112 Hobson Street. And I'm going to read from the letter that I sent to the council before the deadline. So it should be attached to the agenda package, but most of the people here wouldn't have read it. So I thought I would read it and add a few more things. When I bought my house on Hobson Street 5 years ago, it was very important to me that I had a house that was fairly new compared to many of the homes in Lunenburg, mainly because I had took care of and renovated 2 old houses in London, Ontario, and I didn't want to do that again. So that's why that was important to me. My house was built in the 1960s, and all the houses on the Hobson and the Prince Loop were built in the 60s and 70s. When I bought my home, there were no restrictions that would make any changes that I might want to make to my home. If I wanted to put on vinyl siding, I could do that. If I wanted different windows, I could do that. If I wanted a certain kind of a roof or draft line, I could do that. If I wanted an addition on my house, I could do that, as well as the size of the lot was appropriate to the size of the addition. It seems totally unfair to me that under the new bylaw, I would need a certification of appropriateness in order to make those changes. I'm very happy with the house just as it is, and I have no plans to make any changes at all other than regular upkeep. However, it's unfair to me and the other homeowners in this area that we are now restricted in the choices that we may want to make to our own houses. This small subdivision was built roughly 50 to 60 years ago. None of the homes in this subdivision are heritage homes. Any changes that any people living in this subdivision might want to make to their homes would not affect the look of Lunenburg or the desire of tourists to visit Lunenburg. As stated in the FAQ portion of the information on the town's website, Old Town Lunenburg is a National Historic Site and a World Heritage Site. I challenge all of you to explain to me why a small subdivision 50 to 60 years ago has anything to do with Old Town Lunenburg, which was built in the 17, 18, and early 1900s. The homes in this subdivision have been very different from the homes in the old part of town since they were built. They have absolutely nothing to do with the grid on which the town was built or designed. Tourists do not come to view or photograph these homes. They don't paint pictures of them, and they don't put pictures of mid-century homes on the Facebook. The current Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw that is dated April 2001 deals specifically with pre-1940 buildings. What justification is there for new restrictions to be put on buildings that were built after 1940, are outside of the grid pattern of the original plan, and have nothing to do with the historical industrial wood waterfront? The April 2001 did look ahead to consider possible expansion to the Heritage Conservation District based on architectural character, historical association, landscape character, and value in part of the setting. There's a map on that 2001 plan that shows specifically that Hobson and Prince Loop are not included in that area, the Heritage District Plan. This map does show some possible expansion that include parts of Old Newtown and Tannery Road, both of which have many pre-1940 buildings. But as I said, the map does not include Hobson and Prince Loop, as they're all houses built before that or after that. The answer to the first question of the FAQ states that this new plan has done to, and this is a quote, to simplify heritage management regulations and rules. In my mind, to simplify this is not a sufficient reason to deprive all the owners of houses on the loop the right to make any desired changes to their homes that are allowed under the April 2001 plan. The owners bought these homes in good faith, reasonably assuming that because the homes are not heritage homes with historical value, they would not be subjected to the rules and regulations that do affect the homes in other buildings in Old Town Lunenburg. Calling my home and other homes in this same area support structures should not give the town the right to make significant restrictions on my property. The proposed changes to the boundary of the Heritage Conservation District and the changes to the bylaw, in my mind, are an overreach that is unnecessary to preserve Lunenburg as a unique heritage town. I am specifically asking that the draft of the Old Town Lunenburg Heritage, this is hard to say a bunch of times, Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw be revised so the Hobson Prince Loop be excluded from the transition area on the new boundary map. As all of the homes built on that loop were built after 1960, they should not have any new restrictions or regulations placed on, as there's no sufficient rationale for this to be done. I think rules and regulations are important and must protect important aspects of Old Town Lunenburg, but it's equally important that the rights of individual owners of homes be protected. And this is the job of councillors and the municipal government. I did a little bit more investigation after I wrote this letter and sent it in. And I found out that after the Second World War, these kind of subdivisions were built all over Canada and North America. They have the loops, they have often, this is a small one I live in, but there are churches, playgrounds, schools. It's because of us baby boomers, it caused to happen. So it's not a unique kind of building or area. There you could find thousands of them. There's Don Mills in Toronto. I moved into a house in 1965 that was in one of those areas. In St. Thomas, Ontario, where my husband and I both grew up, there was a new area built called Homedale, and it was all like that. It was bungalows, loops, schools, playgrounds, and it's not at all unique. So why is this town trying to preserve? It's about, I did count them, about 20 or 21 houses. If the rules are really meant to make restrictions on new development, that could be done possibly in the areas that don't have houses yet, then I think the plan should say right up front, that's the reason to do it, because you want to restrict what can be built on places that don't have buildings on them now, not just make a blanket statement that includes people or areas that don't need to be included. I am a grandmother, mother. I was a vice principal at a high school and a principal at a high school. So I have lots of times in my life I've had to make regulations and enforce rules. And in my experience, what is easily enforced and is when rules are sensible and people understand them and they're willing openly without even being enforced by any kind of officer. They accept them because they're reasonable and they make sense. I think that's what has happened in Old Town Lunenburg. People accept it. They know when they buy that house that has these restrictions, and it makes sense because they want to preserve Lunenburg as an old town that it is, the part that is old. So that's what I have to say. And if anybody has had any questions from me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone want to ask Linda anything, or you good? No, thank you very much.
Okay.
The next presenter is Bill Fleming.
Not on. There's the red button. Hi, my name is Bill Fleming. I live on Dufferin Street. Actually, Linda's point is very good, but in 25 years, those houses will be 100-year-old houses. And the vernacular of those houses might need to be respected at that point, which is, history moves on and forward. But my main point was in terms of the does this proposed change enhance the overall historic values that are in the that are we're wanting to protect within the whole historic district and the what's now the buffer zone? And that's my only question. Thank you.
Through the chair, certainly the intent of the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw is to, again, protect and enhance the heritage value of Old Town Lunenburg. That would then include the surrounding areas.
Thank you. The next is Blaze Morrison.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Blaze Morrison. I represent the Armor Group out of Halifax. As many people may know in the town or on council, our company recently bought 80 Pelham Street, which is, I guess, recognized, debatable, as the oldest town or oldest house in the town, which also includes the land around the oldest house there. So there's some development potential there. So we understand that we're new to the community and we're definitely late to this process. So it's definitely not our intention to come in here and meddle with that, for lack of a better word. But obviously we've taken our time to review the bylaw from front to back, and we think it's a good bylaw. And we think we actually share a lot of the similar values that the town, at least the Old Town Lunenburg, values, and that is the heritage preservation and its community. A lot of our developments in the city, again, historic properties, Waterside Center, Founders Square, and even say what you want about Queen's Mark, but just a lot of time and care into that process or into that project that we do really think bolsters community. So I believe we sent just some proposed amendments that you guys might have gotten in advance. Did everyone get those in advance? If not, I have a paper copy for everyone.
We got that yesterday afternoon sometime. I think it was late in the day.
Yeah, we sent it Friday. It might have been.
Yeah. We got that, yeah. We missed something.
Do you want them
earlier.
hard copy or? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if everyone in the audience needs to hear these, but yeah, long story short, we reviewed the entire bylaw, and like I said, we really do think it's quite a comprehensive and good bylaw. And as we know, and everybody here probably knows, it's hard to write a bylaw or policies or guidelines when it's heritage, because heritage has a feeling associated with it. associated with it, and feelings are different between different people. So our proposed amendments, we believe was a really light touch, and it was just the two portions of the bylaw that relate to new commercial developments and new residential developments. And all we didn't change anything per se. All we did was we actually used the language in the bylaw to try to make it a bit more consistent. We just found a lot of variation and variability in kind of the language through the bylaw, just how you compare new projects to existing blocks across the street, nearest intersection, on the same block, down the road. So we just try to keep it kind of more consistent. And we think how town staff, professional staff with heritage backgrounds and educations can evaluate proposals. So we do believe it's a light touch and a light proposal, but we think that these amendments would be worthwhile in considering. Like I said, we want to be new community members and new neighbors. And we think that Lunenburg it's our first time not doing something in Halifax municipality, and we're excited to enter into a new community with the utmost respect for the history of the town. So that's why we're here today, and those are the amendments that we're proposing, and we just hope you guys take the time to consider it. So just want to say thank you. Any questions for me, or is that not how it works?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Next on the list is Sal Falk. Okay. Next on the list is David Friendly.
I'm colorblind. Red means on? Whoa, tell the police that. Your worship, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity. The last time I addressed council about a bylaw, let's just say that this bylaw is very it's a breath of fresh air compared to the last time, which was the encroachment bylaw. Some of you might remember. So overall, I thought I was really encouraged by how well this one was put together, but I did have some issues, and I sent them in, but then somebody encouraged me to present. The first part of my email had a bunch of typos, or not typos necessarily, but grammatical errors, which I'm not going to go over. I think they're self-evident. But the last one in there was kind of interesting because I happen to be friends with the people who live in what is termed in the bylaw as the Baptist Church. And some of us have had experiences where tourists who are in town walk into our front doors, assuming that we're just another part of a town museum. And in one case, insisting that we were a B&B because they saw our table set. So if their home on callback is listed as the Baptist Church, they will start getting people coming in their front door. So I think it's just the wording around that needs to be looked at. So more importantly, when we moved here 16 years ago, we weren't aware of any special bylaws or rules or anything around their heritage town, although we knew we were buying a very old home in a heritage area and had to respect that. But I've always considered it a necessity if we were going to make some changes to the rules here, that the local realtors be required by law to inform new buyers of the conditions that they're buying into. I've owned houses in many cities in Canada, and this is the first time I've ever run into the kind of restrictions. And they're not onerous, but they're surprising. They kind of catch you by surprise after you've signed the dotted line and taken out the mortgage. So I think that it would be fairly easy to make it a requirement that realtors or vendors inform, just like you have to inform people of conditions of the house that may not be visible. We have to all sign the thing that says, yeah, there's some roof shingles missing, there's water in the basement. Well, there should be a requirement that people are informed about the special needs of Lunenburg. It's another way to encourage those needs to be met as soon as people move in. I know somebody now bought a property and he's doing renovations, and I have no idea whether he understands what the requirements are. He's from out of province and he's just merrily going along doing a wonderful job, spending a lot of money, but it could be that he's going to be infringing on some of the requirements. I'm not sure what the reference all of a sudden to rooftop decks, which sort of appears almost like a sore thumb in there. There's a rooftop deck now down on Blue Nose Drive on that small restaurant down there. We've got a bunch of houses that have widows walks. And I don't know if they would be included in rooftop decks, but there's no explanation as to why all of a sudden they're not permitted. I don't plan on building one, but it just seemed like an anomaly. The setback rule, which I understand from an aesthetic point of view, and I would actually encourage it unless something else has changed, because I'm not in touch with council as I used to be. There is an existing bylaw from, I think it's 1890 something, that says if a house burns down, you can't rebuild it on the same lot line if the same lot line is on the property line. You have to set it back. And they years ago did that so that if houses were destroyed, the new house front porch wouldn't be on town property. Because at that point they were widening the streets and they wanted to make it easier to do that. That's the explanation we were given the last time this came up. But the new bylaw actually is in conflict with that bylaw. Just to point it out, because I agree with having the same line of sight, but it does go against one of the existing bylaws. There isn't any mention in terms of I'm just going another detail in terms of siding. There's a requirement for the width of siding that's permitted and the material, which has to be wood. But in an age when there are synthetic materials or human created materials such as cement-based siding and so on that can be made to look like wood. And I understand why we don't want vinyl anymore, but there are much more up-to-date composites and so on that can be used instead of wood. That also solves the problem of painting every 4 to 5 years, wood rot, and all of that kind of thing. A little subtext to that is that, as I understand it, after having moved here and found out a little bit more about the UNESCO designation, that there was an obligation, I understand, when Canada supported Lunenburg's submission to UNESCO for our designation, that there was a commitment that UNESCO makes on the country, not on us, but on the country, to support the UNESCO designated site financially. And I understand that millions of dollars are poured into Quebec City every year. A lot of money is poured into Parks Canada sites that are park-like. And unless things have changed in the last 10 years, we get $0. And yet we have to spend a considerable amount of money. When I first moved here, it cost $5,000 to repaint the house. Now it's more like $20,000. And we get no break for any of that. And yet part of the reason we're doing it is to try to maintain the heritage quality of the town and the beauty of the town. And I think it's about time Canada added up and paid its fair share like they do for all the other UNESCO sites in the country, except ours. As little as eliminating the GST on renovations and upkeep, but that would be handing out pennies to the pauper kind of thing. They should come through with some real money to maintain the town, which leads me to the next point, which is that some of the properties are not being properly maintained. Now, whether this is because the people can't afford it or they just don't want to spend the money, we have some real eyesores in the town. And some of them have gotten so bad that really they need to be torn down to rid ourselves of the problem. And one of those relates to another point that I wanted to make, which is the respect for heritage and the idea of civic buildings being automatically part of that just because they were. And so we have the civic property at the corner of Hobson and Townsend, which is the garage, basically, the old armory. Nothing's ever been done to try to restore that to its heritage or historic purpose. It's just used as a garage. In the wintertime, there's all kinds of salt that gets into the sewer system because it falls off the trucks there. And we talked for years about moving that site to a more industrial site. So we've got an industrial site in the middle of a residential area that looks really great for tourism and really great for heritage. The building, at one point, somebody proposed turning it into condos and nothing ever happened. And there was no mention of that in the thing. I don't want to overdo my time. So can you, how much do I have left? I didn't see the clock even started, so. I apologize for that. So I will just bullet point my last points, which is The solar, I think the solar panel thing should be thought about a little more because there's other options there. And my last point, which you started the meeting with, is that the bylaws seem to focus 100% on the colonial cultural value of the town and nothing before 1753. And I think there's a lot of history and heritage we have to talk about with respect to the Indigenous heritage here, which we all, you know, we talk about the treaty lands that we're on and so on. And when that sentence is finished, we're done with it. And yet we're going to have a heritage plan that doesn't really contain anything to do with our Indigenous heritage. I'd like to encourage that to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We've taped the part where you want us to ask the federal government for more money, and we'll send that through tomorrow morning if we can. Okay, we'll get right on that. Thank you. So the next speaker is Sam Kinsley. Okay. So then our final in-house speaker is Jesse Ward. Okay, you missed that part. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to the one online presentation by Townsend Anderson. Do we have him? Okay, and we have one other on there too, we think. Okay. Oh, you didn't sign. Okay, come in. Yeah, you did.
Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry. Madam Clerk, when I came in today, I wasn't specific of where I wanted to speak. And anyway, it was here. Mr. Chair, my name is Rachel Martin. This evening, I'm presenting on behalf of myself and my husband, Donald Mitchell, who is also in the gallery. I will leave a written copy with the clerk. The draft Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw is a result of a significant amount of work by staff, Heritage Committee members, councillors, and citizens who attended open houses and reviewed and commented on drafts. Donald and I think the plan and bylaws contain improvements to the management of the town's built heritage. However, we also think that they include a serious risk of losing the town's UNESCO World Heritage Site designation. This risk lies in the 2021 zoning changes on the buffer zone lands before obtaining an opinion from UNESCO on whether and to what extent this would be acceptable. Further, the draft district plan now under review removes policies 5.1.1 and 7.1.1 from the district plan itself. 5.1.1 protected the land from development, and 7.1.1 protected view planes. To expand, the 1994 application by the town to UNESCO was followed up by a request from UNESCO to clarify the buffer zone and the controls on it. That was a November 4th, 1994 letter to Parks Canada from UNESCO. The requested information was supplied by the town in some detail. The 1995 evaluation by ICOMOS, which is the UNESCO organization that reviews World Heritage applications, subsequently accepted the town's submission with the details of the buffer zone. And I quote, "The nominated property of the Old Town is surrounded by a natural buffer zone in the form of water to the north and south, and very steep slopes on the other sides, upon which development is impractical. Any potential development in these areas is further controlled by the municipal development plan and land use bylaw, which lays down stringent conditions relating to the maintenance of traditional rural land uses." And that last sentence I've underlined as my emphasis. It wasn't underlined in the quote. And again, that's from the ICOMOS International Committee Old Town Lunenburg Evaluation Report 1995. In our interpretation, that's Donald and I, it seems that the remaining historical common lands around the town were considered an important frame that set the town apart from many other surviving British towns in North America. The World Heritage Committee approved Lunenburg's addition to the World Heritage List in 1995. Consequently, we think that the changed zoning on the buffer zones, which happened in 2021, and the removal of the policies pose a serious risk. We suggest that until such time as the town receives a written response from UNESCO on whether the policy and zoning changes proposed will affect the status of Lunenburg as a World Heritage Site, that the draft plan be amended to include policies 5.1.1 and 7.1.1, and the bylaw be amended to revert the zoning of the remaining buffer zone lands to those existing or that existed, the zoning that existed before the 2021 bylaw zoning changes. It is also our understanding that the current Blockhouse Hill project was to establish a proposal on some of the Blockhouse Hill buffer lands, and this would be submitted to UNESCO for review. So at the same time, we suggest that the town should provide this submission to UNESCO before it changes the zoning further on any buffer lands and remove the principles. To do otherwise is to prejudge a favorable opinion from UNESCO. If their opinion is not favorable and the changes have already been made, who knows what the fallout could be and the cost of that fallout. We believe the prudent course is to bring UNESCO into the discussion before further changes are made to the buffer land zoning and principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before we go virtual, is there anyone else in the room that didn't see the sign up sheet and would like to speak? Well, we'll give you this opportunity at this point. Just put your hand up or walk to the podium.
I'd like to speak, but I think I post that.
We'll move that to 8.2 because I'm also gonna ask anyone to, if they want to say anything for 8.2, because we didn't have a sign up sheet for 8.2. So we'll bring that up at that time when we get to that part of the agenda, if you're okay with that. Okay, so everybody in here is good. Oh, no, okay. If you want to go ahead there, just go to the podium and state your name and address and.
My name is Tom Kurlick, and I live at 112 Hobson Street. My point is a very narrow one. I spoke to Hillary Grant approximately 2 weeks by phone. The reason I contacted her was because on the town website, there is a plan to which I was directed, which is a 2016 plan and which represents the World Heritage buffer zone and primary protection zone. It does not include the Prince Street, Hobson Street loop. So my contacting Hillary Grant was to find out whether, in fact, that map was an accurate representation of UNESCO's view with respect to the loop. And if so, does it currently represent UNESCO's view with respect to the loop? Hillary Grant, if I am not misconstruing what she said to me, said, yes, it represents UNESCO's view and continues to represent UNESCO's view. Now, I infer that the impetus to include the loop is an initiative of the town. If as Ms. Grant stated at the outset tonight, the intent is to have a ring of protection. And as what interested me in what she said was that she said every street that comes into the primary area of protection is something that should be included in the transition area. And I acknowledge my point's a narrow one, but the fact is that Prince and Hobson represent a loop street. They come into the protection area, but in essence, they're a cul-de-sac of sorts. So that's my one observation, that if the point of attaching every street that comes into the primary area of protection is to somehow have a thoroughfare into the neighborhood, into the old town that somehow is not prejudicial aesthetically, then I draw this narrow distinction between such streets and the Prince Hobson loop, and that's my sole point.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience? Okay, Ted, just go to the, yep, come on up front here.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Ted Kelly. I live at 82 Kemp Street. I actually rendered a written submission, which unfortunately missed the deadline, but I understand from Ms. Warren that it will be included in the package that council receives on the subject. Or I'll take this opportunity now that you presented it to me to make a couple of points, which are more fully explained in my written submission. But first of all, I would like to challenge the notion that restrictive measures in areas additional to the Old Town area are needed to protect and preserve the heritage of the Old Town. And I would point out, and I'm sure the development officer is aware of this, that there are several UNESCO sites around the world that do not have buffer zones, and that they've survived quite well. I'd also point out that council should perhaps look at this as on a cost-benefit basis and try to analyze just what are the benefits of having heritage beyond the Old Town. Heritage protected measures, I should say. And the final point I want to make is to question whether these protective measures are really feasible or sustainable in achieving the objective that you're after. In the 20+ years we've had heritage conservation area and restrictive measures in place, we've all witnessed what has happened. Chimneys, which were a very distinctive heritage feature in this town, have largely disappeared. Roofing materials have now transformed into metal roofs, many of them which have no heritage aspect. How long is it going to be before wood, which was pointed out by Mr. Friendly, becomes prohibitively costly to maintain and install? The idea, the notion that you can stop the clock by preserving architectural form and materials will just not fly. It's an impossible thing. And I think that's been proven over the last 25 years. I'd also ask council to look at these measures that are before them. Consider the cost that you are incurring not only for the town, but that you are imposing on residents in the town, and look at it in the context of the fiscal circumstance that the town supposedly faces, and also the cost to the residents of the town. It's just like another tax. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Okay, so anybody else? Okay, we're going to move to virtual now. Oh, there's one more person. Hold on. Come forward. Sorry, I missed the hand.
I'd just like to say, follow on from the previous speaker, that I'm concerned about how much this is all costing and how much is it going to put on the taxpayers of the town of Lunenburg. I've lived on the upper part of Pelham Street for 50 years, own the property. I've maintained the property. To put, you know, the previous speakers said, do we really need this buffer zone? And these around, we got the old part of Lunenburg. It's been like that for many years. It hasn't been, you know, people that live there are satisfied with that. I mean, if they buy in there, they know what they're buying. Do we really need this buffer zone, and how much is it going to cost the taxpayers of Lunenburg? This is what I'm concerned about, and also concerned about Blockhouse Hill. Is it in this heritage expansion area or not? I'm not sure if that's clear at the moment. And if Blockhouse Hill is developed, how much is going to cost for the sewer, the water? We got a sewage treatment plant that I built, I helped build in Lunenburg. And when we built it, we didn't know, the people who experienced like myself didn't know it was going to work. We knew it was going to cost the taxpayers of Lunenburg hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep in operation. But it was sold to the town of Lunenburg at that time. And it was a new project, as far as I remember. And this is what I'm concerned about. If we do Blockhouse Hill, the water, the sewer, the power, how much is it going to cost? On the way to Riverport, there's a bridge that was built. It took nearly 2 years to build. They found they didn't have the right power. So that pretty well put the project a year behind. If we expand in Lunenburg, how many years is it going to take? And how much money? And somebody's got to pay for it. Is it going to be federal government if it's part of? I don't think so. If it's part of the heritage, UNESCO heritage, I don't think they're going to pay. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? So now we'll go virtual.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Townsend, you can go ahead now.
Okay,
Okay,
good. My name is Townsend Anderson. I live at 55 Townsend Street. Yep. Same name. Your worship and counselors, I implore you to please table the adoption of the Heritage Conservation District Plan 2023. We will refer to it as a 2023 HCD plan, pending resolution of past actions of council that have put our Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site at risk. Past actions with which this 2023 HCD plan seeks to be aligned. In the 2001 Heritage Conservation District Plan, referred to as the 2001 HCD plan, the following references speak directly to the historic significance and conservation of Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. 2.0 objectives. 2.2 conservation of historic urban form, in part, quote, and a well-defined distinction between urban and non-urban areas, i.e. clear edges formed by the town-owned open spaces of Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. 2.3, conservation of the setting, in part, quote, conservation of open spaces, particularly Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. Conservation of views, including panoramic views from Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. 3.0, establishment of Heritage Conservation District. 3.3, Old Town Heritage Conservation District boundary. In part, quote, it shall be the intention of the council that Old Town Heritage Conservation District shall include the designated World Heritage Site as well as adjacent areas, including Gallows Hill and Blockhouse Hill. 5.0, policies for conservation of historic urban form. 5.1, conservation of the edges of the Old Town Model Plan. In part, quote, the Old Town has remained clearly legible in the modern landscape, partly because it is bordered in its upper sections by the undeveloped open spaces, Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. These areas of open space give clear definition and are also historically significant in their own right. 5.1.1, conservation of open space on Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. In part, quote, it shall be the intention of council to conserve the open character of town-owned lands on Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill in order to maintain a clear physical definition of the edges of the historic Old Town Plan and protect the historic setting of the town's early fortifications on Blockhouse Hill. Council shall also consider amending the zoning designations of these sites to ensure that permitted future development will be compatible with their historic open space character and their significance as defining elements in the landscape setting of the Old Town. And finally, 7.0, policies for conservation of the setting. 7.1, views. Number 2, Blockhouse Hill, in part, quote, a panoramic view in 2 parts, A, to the east and north overlooking Back Harbor, and B, to the east and south. I list these references because they have been omitted in the 2023 HCD plan for obvious reasons. Council rezoned Blockhouse Hill in direct contradiction with these 2001 stated objectives and policies. Council did so without notifying Parks Canada and undertaking a heritage impact assessment of this major policy change on the outstanding universal value of our World Heritage Site. And I urge you to see the document entitled Report on a Threatened UNESCO World Heritage Site, What We Learned, Old Town Lunenburg and its Buffer Zone, researched and written by Friends of Blockhouse Hill, dated November 8th, 2023. It is painfully transparent that this 2023 HCD plan is intended to bring the plan and bylaws into alignment with the rezoning. Keeping the Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill references in the 2001 HCD plan would obviously be contradictory to the new objectives and policies. If you adopt this 2023 HCD plan, you will be putting our Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site at even greater risk. And worse, further complicating the repeal or annulment of the several town council actions that have put us in this tenuous position. I urge you not to take this step. By tabling the 2023 HCD plan, you will positively demonstrate to Parks Canada and UNESCO your commitment, our community's commitment, to make right the past transgressions and redouble our efforts to properly protect and manage our World Heritage Site. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for accommodating me via Zoom.
Thank you, Townsend. Okay, so. Okay, so we've heard all the public presentations. We'll now turn it over to council members if they have any questions and concerns or questions for Hillary. Councilor Mosier.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Hillary, we hear this, the UNESCO argument so often, during all these debates, no matter what it is. It seems like it's always the UNESCO discussion comes up. When can we possibly have someone come here and definitively tell us that what we're doing is perfectly acceptable or deemed perfectly, in what would put us in jeopardy of this UNESCO site? And I don't know, like, at what point? I know, like, who can do this? We've had certain experts come in, and whatever they tell us gets dismissed, and then and this debate just keeps going on and on and on, and I'm getting really kind of tired listening to it.
Hillary.
Through the chair, it's an interesting question. So the World Heritage Committee that falls under the United Nations is the body that makes decisions on, for example, World Heritage listing, and is the ultimate authority in interpreting World Heritage documents. Just as council changes, so does the World Heritage Committee. And their decisions are subject to a vote, similar to the World Heritage, similar to council. Bodies such as ICOMOS International, which was referenced this evening, are similar to staff in the sense that they are a body of expertise that then advise the World Heritage Committee. So when you're asking who can definitively say what is the answer that the World Heritage Committee would give, only the World Heritage Committee can definitively make those statements. And again, just as councils change, World Heritage Committees change, and decisions can change from one committee to another.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll echo Councilor Mosier's concerns. We've been hearing this at almost every public hearing, almost every email we get disputes what was done in 2021 primarily, and now that we're going even deeper, I guess. So is there any way through UNESCO we can get even written confirmation that this is what we did in 2021? Was that okay? And if we go in even further, is that okay? Because right now all it is what we're saying and what they're saying, and nobody really from UNESCO has chimed in, and I certainly don't know the answer, right? So I just ask if there's any, because I'm like Councilor Mosier, this fight will go on forever until we actually have someone from UNESCO either write us, show up to a meeting or whatever, maybe before the final reading of this, we can get some clarity, because I don't have any myself personally, quite frankly.
It's an excellent question. As I have said, the Parks Canada is the state party to UNESCO. They are the first group that we should be going to for advice on such matters. They have been notified every step of this process and with all of our other planning processes, certainly since I have arrived. So we welcome comments from them. We have yet to receive any comments from them. We do and have heard from a number of experts regarding our UNESCO status. And certainly it appears that the status of the buffer zone is of particular interest. Certainly, I can provide additional information to answer any questions that you may have on that specific aspect of our UNESCO designation.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns at this time for Hillary? Deputy Mayor?
Still sounds weird. I'm curious, just to continue on with your train of thought there, Hillary. Could you explain the value of the of maintaining the buffer zones? I find it curious. We've had people speaking very passionately in support of one, and others speaking very passionately against it. Why do we? Maybe just explain to the broader public here. Why do we need the buffer zones? And then I've got another question after you answer that, please.
Through the chair. So a buffer zone is largely established to prohibit any development that would detract from a World Heritage Site. Here in Lunenburg, the World Heritage Site is lovingly referred to as Old Town. Buffer zone would be areas surrounding Old Town, including Blockhouse Hill and Gallows Hill. Those areas are part of the UNESCO buffer zone. They are included in the transition area under this draft Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw. It is true that not all World Heritage Sites have buffer zones. However, they are recommended as best practice under the UNESCO operational guidelines. Canada did go through an exercise to reaffirm its buffer zones relative to the Canadian World Heritage Sites. So it is a protective mechanism that Parks Canada has supported.
Okay, if I could follow up with another question then. I'm hearing tonight concerns from people who live in what would be a new regulations imposed in the buffer zone. And I have to say, I agree, it's not particularly fair for someone who's lived in their home for a considerable amount of time for us to change the rules midstream. So what I'm concerned is, or what I'm wondering is, in particular, the Hobson, we heard some folks speak. What would be what's the impact on if we did not include the pre-existing homes on Hobson? In particular, what I'm thinking is, we're talking about changing areas right now where there is no development. We're talking about Blockhouse Hill. We're talking about that buffer zone. So if we just restricted changes to the buffer zone to that particular area, not to existing homes that are already on the street grid, would that negatively in fact impact our UNESCO designation or the buffer zone?
Through the chair, the transition area and the UNESCO buffer zone are two distinctive things. So municipal council gets to set the boundaries of the municipal heritage district. The World Heritage Committee sets the boundaries for the buffer zone. Again, what is referred to as the loop is not part of the UNESCO buffer zone, and hence UNESCO would have no standing to speak to development in that area unless they were to modify the boundaries of the World Heritage District. Heritage practice would suggest that if development on, for example, Gallows Hill, Upper King Street, Blockhouse Hill could impact negatively upon the district, so could detractive development on the Oxner Loop. The inclusion of that area in the transition area is not to manage those homes as heritage properties. They would fall under design guidelines that would oversee new construction on all in the entire transition area. The current heritage plan and bylaw that is in place, the 2001 Heritage Conservation Plan and bylaw, does not include the loop in the area. However, it does have conservation and design guidelines that guide new development. So guiding new development under a heritage plan and bylaw is not unusual within the province, nor is it somehow a move away from current practice in Lunenburg. But yes,
Okay.
that loop is not included in the World Heritage Buffer Zone, and hence not including it in the Municipal Heritage Plan and bylaw, in my estimation, shouldn't impact our World Heritage status. Again, unless a detractive, there's always the possibility that a detractive development in that area could spurn the World Heritage Committee to action.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Are you, Deputy Mayor, are you finished, or do you have another one?
I have one more request of Hillary, just because I've had this conversation with her. I've asked the same questions that Mr. Friendly asked, and I think it would be educational for her to explain what she told me, because I asked about, instead of prescribing wood as the material for siding, why we couldn't look at newer alternate materials on historic homes. And I think it would be beneficial for her to explain that to the broader public, because I thought it was quite interesting.
Through the chair. So the materiality issue is very complicated and one of particular interest to both the residents, to heritage practitioners. And it has come up multiple times before the Heritage Advisory Committee and has been evaluated there. Our World Heritage designation, our heritage value, our outstanding universal value, as it's referred to in that setting, is outlined in our statement of outstanding universal value. And that specifically refers to Lunenburg's wooden tradition. Hence, it is important to our World Heritage listening that Old Town Lunenburg remain a town of wood. Now, under the current draft Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw, we are allowing metal roofs, asphalt roofs, vinyl windows, and alternate materials for doors. However, the draft does insist on wooden clapboard and siding. Part of the thought behind expanding that into the transition area was an interest that the Heritage Advisory Committee expressed in supporting trades and skills. This idea that both the affordability of materials and the cost of workmanship for some of these heritage trades, particularly the use of wood in traditional structures, those trades are at risk due to both rising costs of materials, but also a certain lack of work. So if you can expand, if you can create policies or regulations that stimulate a market for those trades, then that should help offset costs and ensures that those skills be passed down to future generations, in the long run, conserving Old Town Lunenburg's heritage value. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that many of these new materials have yet to be fully, such as composite siding, alternatives to wooden siding. There are very few long-range studies that consider how these materials interact with traditional wooden structures. As we've learned from, for example, vinyl siding, the use of some of these incompatible materials can greatly accelerate deterioration in these historic structures. Thus, it's staff's opinion that until those materials have been thoroughly tested in an academic setting through rigorous peer review, it is not advisable for us to be using them in the district.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, is that good?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councilor Mosier, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. One more question, then through to Hillary. You mentioned earlier that the municipality regulates or stipulates the site that we want to, and then the UNESCO stipulates the buffer zone. So we're changing the buffer zone now, or are we not? Like, why are we changing the buffer zone? I mean, we're expanding it, as I understand, right? So if we just left it the way it was before, is like, I mean, what's the cause and effect of all that?
Through the chair, I'll quickly, if I may, just explain the boundaries of Old Town Lunenburg. Of course, many of these documents use the same words and that can create confusion. When we say Old Town Lunenburg, what exactly physically in space are we referring to? So on the World Heritage level, there is the Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site, and there is a buffer zone. Under our current 2001 Heritage Plan and Bylaw, there is Old Town Lunenburg Municipal Heritage District. The boundary of that is the same as, give or take, as the World Heritage Site. Currently, the majority of the World Heritage Site buffer zone is not included in our Municipal Heritage District. Of course, this draft does include everything in the World Heritage Buffer Zone and then some. In particular, those areas of addition, those areas that are in this draft and are not included in the World Heritage Buffer Zone would be, for example, the Loop, Dufferin Street, and Pelham Street. So entrances into Old Town Lunenburg, and again, the Loop. The logic behind including the Loop is, again, if development on Blockhouse Hill, Upper King Street could detract from the district, logic suggests that I'm going to use a strategically hyperbolic example, a 200-story building on the Loop, again, not permitted under the land use bylaw, but would similarly detract from the district if it was located on the Loop or Upper King Street. That's part of the logic for there. Best practice under UNESCO documents suggests including entrances and exits from a World Heritage Site in a buffer zone. World Heritage Committee has not recognized the entrances and exits from Old Town. However, that is how they were added to the transition area. However, if council would like to remove those areas from the transition area, they can direct staff to do so by reworking the boundaries of the municipal conservation district to remove those areas from the transition area.
Thank you. I have a question or two, if I may. Number one, I guess my first thing is it possible to exclude, is it possible to change this bylaw and include the areas you're talking, but exclude all pre-existing builds that are currently in the buffer zone, but have it for any new builds moving forward in that expanded buffer zone, so that those people that have purchased properties there over the years, knowing they didn't have to do that type of work or that type of maintenance, would then be exempt from this bylaw. But if you decide to buy a vacant lot there or buy a house, once the property changes hands, I guess, then the rules change for that property owner, because most of these homes, especially on the Loop, are split level or bungalows that are 50 years old max. So I just asked that question. Is that possible? That's my first question.
To your question, certainly staff can explore that. That would require some fairly substantial edits to the way that the plan and bylaw is currently presented, but certainly it is possible and something staff can explore at your direction.
Thank you. And then my second question is the one thing that Mr. Friendly brought up in his report was making whatever the bylaw is that we pass mandatory for realtors to present to their clients when selling a property. Is it a way to put that in the bylaw? Because I definitely agree that probably, especially during like COVID, I know it's a bad word, but people were buying property sight unseen from thousands of miles away. Is it possible to make that a mandatory document in the realtor's hands when someone's buying a property? Because if not, they come here and it becomes a problem that you guys get and we get, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll steward that question. We wouldn't have any jurisdiction over the real estate association to require them to do anything. What we could certainly do is make copies available to them and also provide perhaps a paraphrase, a Heritage 101 to their associations to let them know some of the requirements the town will currently have. Thank you.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Any other questions this time, or anyone? Go ahead, Councilor Mosier.
Sorry about this. I just want to try to get this all dialed in. Thanks, Your Worship, and through to Hillary once more. So our land use bylaws usually they supersede the heritage bylaws. So would our land use bylaws, would that protect us from that 200-story, like, as you said, it would protect us through that 200-story building. So is that enough meat there to sort of say, without, imposing new rules for residents that become accustomed to live in their homes the way they do? Would that be enough protection for them at this particular time?
Through the chair, it's a very interesting question. Certainly that has been the course that has been in place since the 2001 bylaw. Again, in the nomination dossier that was prepared and sent to the World Heritage Committee, it did specifically talk about our land use bylaw provisions as providing protection to the areas around Old Town Lunenburg. Of course, many policies in both the 2001 Heritage Plan and Bylaw and the nomination dossier do, for example, talk about residential development that is allowed in areas of the buffer zone. So that has been the course to date. It is often considered best practice to have specific heritage guidelines in UNESCO buffer zones. Land use bylaws, for example, can be unbelievably useful in guiding the scale and density of buildings, the height of buildings. Land use bylaws tend to be lighter on design criteria. So in terms of what a building might actually look like, any specific design features it might need to have, those types of provisions would normally be found in a heritage conservation district plan and bylaw.
So if we would talk specifically about developing Blockhouse Hill, then under that buffer zone, then we'd have to have wood siding. Would that be correct? And that would, and again, we're trying to make this affordable. We're trying to make this, I always envision it as, high efficiency, low maintenance, that type of thing. So that really wouldn't fit that glove in this particular instance, if we kept that expanded beyond what it exists now, because it's not included in there in the current bylaw, correct?
Through the chair, under the current 2001 Heritage Plan and Bylaw that is currently in force, often referred to as the Plaskett, there is no design controls on Blockhouse Hill. Under the current draft Heritage Plan and Bylaw that sits before you, there are design guidelines that any development on that site would be subject to. That includes the use of wooden siding. I'd also like to draw your attention to policy 14 of the plan, as it's particularly relevant to Blockhouse Hill and the way that this draft plan and bylaw might guide development there. Policy 14 says that it's council's policy to conserve all character defining elements within Old Town Lunenburg. And amongst the list of those elements is the distinction between urban and non-urban areas and unobstructed views over Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District from the location of the town's 4 original blockhouses. One, of course, was located on Blockhouse Hill. There is also a mention of archaeological remains. So this, combined with the design guidelines, gives a heritage officer authority to protect these character defining elements. So many of the policies that were referenced in public presentations are captured under that new value-based approach. So again, currently under the land use bylaw, things such as scale are guided, are protected. Under the draft, to summarize, there's design guidelines, including the use of wooden siding. And there's also a stipulation to protect the distinction between urban and non-urban areas moving forward on that site.
Okay, so is there any other questions by council at this time? Okay, no other questions. We'll close the hearing. And we'll I guess move on. Do we make a motion now for this to go to the next reading? December 12th, and yeah, so December 12th is the second reading. So at the second reading, I guess we'll have maybe, Hillary, you're gonna go back with some of the things you've heard tonight, hopefully, and take notes and bring them forward for the second reading. Because I'll be quite honest, when the second reading comes forward, I probably won't support the bylaw the way it's currently written without some amendments. So, Councillor Moser.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, because I was just looking, I thought that may have came up later in the agenda, but it doesn't. I'd be like kind of like of the same opinion. It's the buffer zone that really throws me off. I think the work on the bylaw itself is very good. I think it's far better than the one that exists. But my issues go in with this expanded buffer zone and the impact that's going to have on just the future of our community. So I would recommend that be either left as it is currently or shrunken to some degree of to not impact future developments.
Thank you. So we'll see you, I guess, all on the 12th. So now we'll move on to the 8.2 public amendment to the NPS and land use bylaw. And we're going to open the hearing with, I guess, Arthur, you're doing this one. Okay, Arthur's going to do this one. And then when Arthur's done, we will ask for any public input at that time because we didn't put a sheet out. So go ahead, Arthur.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the public record, my name's Arthur McDonald and I'm the manager for Planning and Heritage. This evening is a public hearing and we're here to receive public input on amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to delete architectural control areas. In keeping with the town's comprehensive community plan and council's direction, the town intends to adopt a new heritage conservation district plan and bylaw and delete the architectural control areas from the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. The Dufferin Street architectural control area will be incorporated within the Heritage Conservation District. The Tannery Road architectural control area will be eliminated. The thought being that Tannery Road was distinct in its own right and did not contribute to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is the narrative of the new Old Town Heritage Conservation District. This also follows the rationale for the new district boundaries as outlined in the background study approved by Council on August 9, 2022. The MPS amendments are outlined in attachment C of the report, and the land use bylaw amendments are outlined in attachment D of the report. The proposal involves the creation of a new Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw and the deletion of the architectural control areas from the town's MPS and OUB. This enables the creation of one document focusing on architectural provisions and eliminates the need for cross-referencing the town's municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw when it comes time to consider development proposals. Architectural provisions will be regulated through the Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw through the issuance of certificates of appropriateness. That is my report for council this evening. I'd like to open up the floor for any public input with regards to this public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. So who in the audience wants to speak on this item? Okay, come forward and come to the mic there. Is there anybody else that would like to speak afterwards? If you do, just put your hand up so I know. I don't want to miss anybody, so. Okay.
No. I'm Oliver Osmond. I live at 93 Buena Vista Court, which for those of you who don't know is off Tannery Road. And I'm also a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I very much hope that whether you alter it a bit yet, but one way or another, I do hope that before too long, this or slightly amended new heritage bylaw really will be passed. I think it's about 2015 the Heritage Advisory Committee first started working on this, so it's not just a very quick process. My concern, though, is about the elimination of any kind of controls on Tannery Road. I mean, I understand the administrative argument for cleaning things up, but a number of people who live on Tannery Road would like to see some controls continue. Certainly some I've talked to, particularly those who have done significant work to their historic houses in recent years and went to great trouble to conform to all the requirements. And they now feel, well, you know, what do we do all that for if there's going to be no controls anymore? Of the houses on Tannery Road, slightly over half are older than 1900, and several of them date from quite early in the 19th century. There are 3 historic barns on Tannery Road. Bill Plaskett describes them as a testimony to the original farming nature of Tannery Road. My own property was originally a farm and actively cultivated until the late 1940s. I think part of how we've kind of wished to discard Tannery Road from this process is that the outside consultants who were involved in Project Lunenburg never seemed to value Tannery Road and its architecture. They came here from the big city. They drove in via Dufferin Street, and so they were very impressed by Dufferin Street. They never really looked at Falkland Street or Tannery Road. And then there was also the little matter of ABCO finding the designation inconvenient for future development. But I do think Tannery Road does need some kind of control, however that's devised. It's seen by almost everybody who comes to Lunenburg and looks out across the harbour. And, you know, you don't have to have all that detail, perhaps, but the general sense of how Tannery Road presents itself is still important when seen across the harbour. When 17 years ago I wrote the brief for my architect who was designing our house, I pointed out that in summer, thousands of people every day would look across the harbour at it, and it needed to be appropriate to Lunenburg's indigenous architecture. The other thing is that a great many people do come and drive along Tannery Road, park their cars, look at Old Town from Tannery Road. There's a constant stream of big coaches. That's part of a problem of living there, actually, because of there being no sidewalks along past ABCO. And all these people look at the Old Town from Tannery Road, and inevitably they look at Tannery Road too. And I think in some way in the future, we need to go on having some kind of control on Tannery Road. I'm not trying to hold up this process, but I do want to put down a big marker that we mustn't forget about that. And maybe there needs to be some supplementary system at some point, not too far in the future.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any? Rosemary?
Hi, Rosemary Smith, Prince Street. So I'm just a little confused after I'm hearing this presentation, and I 100% agree. There are far many more historical homes on Tannery than the loop that we've been talking about all night. So I'm a little bit confused about why a historical area would be removed and a not historical area would be added.
Hillary, do you want to answer that?
Thank you so much. Through the chair, it's an excellent question. The generally buffer zones are directly adjacent to World Heritage sites. So of course, the harbor would be directly adjacent to the Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site, as would Blockhouse Hill, Upper King Street, the Loop, what I think of as the back of Old Town Lunenburg. When we reviewed the Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw, it was determined that Tannery Road has a character quite distinct and historically unique in comparison to Old Town Lunenburg. If people are interested in seeing that area protected because of its heritage value, a separate heritage conservation district would be the recommendation of staff.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Okay, anyone from council have any questions for Hillary on 8.2? Okay, no other questions. We're going to close this portion of the public hearing, and we're going to once again see you all on December 12th for the next reading. So we'll move on to business arising and unfinished business. The first thing is 9.1, Cornwallis Street renaming. There's a draft motion there, but I'll put it out to council at this time. Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, just trying to find my button. So I know we've been around and round and round on this, and this has been a long time coming. I must say the choices that we've been presented, I'm struggling in particular with one, and I apologize. The day this came to council, I was ill, or I would have had this conversation then. The name Queen Street. I have no problem with Queen Street. I have no problem with any other street except for this one. My understanding, and please, anyone in council or the mayor, whoever else would like to correct me if I'm wrong, but when we started talking about this, the idea was reconciliation and to do better for our relationship with our Mi'kmaq neighbors and residents. And I struggle. I can't reconcile naming a street where we want to remove the name of somebody who is representative of the crown for tremendous acts, and then proposing to then again rename it after the very crown that he was representing. It makes no sense. So I don't know. I think we need to take Queen Street out of consideration. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think it's a slap in the face, quite frankly, to our Indigenous neighbors. And again, residents, I should qualify that. So I guess I looked to the CAO perhaps for a little help in this one, because I realize if we try and remove that, that could skew the results of the polling we've done. Do we have a proposal here? If we were to remove that, is there some kind of system where we could recalibrate the votes, take the next largest number of votes? What could we do if I made a motion tonight to remove Queen Street from consideration?
Thank you, Jamie.
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor, thank you for those words. You have a couple of options, of course, available to you. Council could rename the street whatever you like. Secondly, you could go through the ranked ballots as they are now and choose any one of them, whether it's the next one in line. Alternatively, we could also take the data back, remove Queen from the data set completely, and recrunch those numbers and see how the ranking comes up then. It might likely still come up, as you see, with just removing Queen. But if you'd like, if council chooses, we could certainly take that away and bring that back as soon as we could for reconsideration with a revised data set. Thank you.
Councillor Duggan.
I think it's important to note that at the time that these names were presented, we had a very diverse group of committee members, and that the names did not come up randomly. They were well thought over. Queen Street was one that was put forward by that group, which had representation from many different local communities. And it was added to the list for that reason. And so I do think that it needs to remain as part of the list and still be part of the consideration. I do appreciate Councillor or Deputy Mosher or Deputy Mayor Halverson's comments about it, but I would like to just have it be part of the larger discussion that we're going to have about this.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
So through the chair, and I'm not sure if this question can be answered, but if I understand in the process, and first of all, I want to say I agree with Councillor Halverson's point. I really didn't feel that Queen Street was appropriate for what I understood we were trying to achieve in the context of reconciliation. And if I understand the process correctly, did the suggestion of, I believe it was Reconciliation Street, that was put forward, did that, I'm thinking that came a little bit later, so not everybody necessarily had the opportunity to vote on it per se when it went to the community as a whole. Like I'm somehow in my mind, I'm thinking it came in a suggestion of other, like folks had put forward other suggestions, and at which point that came in as a suggestion. So I'm wondering, again, I want to go back. I would like a clear understanding of what it is that we were trying to achieve in the context of eliminating the name of Cornwallis Street. I understood, to Councillor Halverson's point, Deputy Mayor Halverson's point, that it was in the spirit of reconciliation. So if that is in fact the goal of council, then I think we should be looking at names that would reflect, and I'm not sure suggestions such as Queen Street would carry that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Duggan, or Councillor Duggan first, and Jamie.
So in saying what I said previously, I'm not saying that Queen Street is the appropriate name. I'm saying that I do believe that it should stay in as part of the conversation that we're having. It's important for it to be on the list and for us to be able to discuss it. Not to say that it should be our final choice. I think that everybody has a clear opinion about what that represents, but I do think that it's important that we keep it on the list as a discussion point.
Thank you. Jamie, you're next in. Councillor Mosier, I think, wants to speak. Did you have your hand up, Deputy Mayor, as well again, or no? You did? Okay, so then after Jamie, Councillor Mosier, then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And normally I wouldn't supersede any of the councillors, but I think it's important to answer Councillor Sanford's question about Reconciliation Street and that coming along later. That was part of the surveyed questionnaire, so it was available for those to speak to it, or vote for it, I should say. One thing I also want to, I guess, enlighten is that we're not bound by any committee recommendations. They're there on behalf of council to suggest this is how we think. So I want to make sure we all understand we're not bound by those decisions. However, as Councillor Duggan had astutely mentioned, the names that were considered at that committee meeting are present here for the sake of fairness. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mosier.
Thank you, Worship. Well, the fly in the ointment here for me is whether I like the name Queen Street or not. We did send it out to the public and they did vote on it. And that is the overwhelmingly majority of all the, the different scenarios that was presented to us. So, if we didn't want to hear from the public, we shouldn't have asked them, I guess. So, to me, I'm a little bit bound by, what the information we got back for that survey.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Halverson, and then how'd that get selected? And then Councillor Ernst after that.
I just want to clarify for Councillor Sanford, the name Reconciliation Street actually was suggested by Dan Paul, the author of We Are Not the Savages. We Were Not the Savages, pardon me, in a letter to council, and that's why it was included. Actually, if you look back, the letter he wrote was quite eloquent and I thought quite thoughtful as well, with the intent behind the name, in indicating that, we are all treaty people, and the idea is that these treaties were signed in friendship. We meant to work together. Anyway, I won't get the long and the short of it here, but As far as Queen Street and to Councillor Mosher's point, as I said, you know, had I been there that night, you would have been hearing the same argument. I don't think it was appropriate that it be included. I mean, I'll leave this with you. If you can explain to a grade 8 class in Eskasoni why it's appropriate to rename Cornwallis Street Queen Street, then we can vote for it. And you can do that in all honesty and hold your head up. I don't think we can. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Ernst.
Thank you. And I'll just start by saying that I do not in the least disagree with the Deputy Mayor Halverson or some of the other points around. I would like to add some counterpoints. Again, as Councillor Mosher had brought up, this was put to a townwide poll. I also would like to just throw into the ring the fact that, as we've heard tonight, as we've been hearing for months at this point, there's a lot of passion surrounding the UNESCO designation. If you look at the naming scheme of the original grid layout, the 3 center streets were named after, albeit male, members of the royal family, with King in the center, Duke and Prince on each side. The 2 streets on flanking either side of that, the 2 governors of Nova Scotia up to that point, Cornwallis on the west, Hobson on the east. And then, of course, the following streets would have been the original edge of town, which were later transformed into Callback, Creighton, and Kent Street in the late Victorian era, named after, at least 2 of them named after prominent business families in town. So, and then of course the east-west streets being either Nova Scotian or British military and government officials. So to me, I just wanted to throw in the Queen is more fitting and more apt to the original plan in the settlement of Lunenburg. And I would just like to see if there's any, again, the question is, should UNESCO be notified? And where the grid layout plays an integral part of our designation, is that going to be affected at all? Also, I'm thrilled that we did name 2 parks. Personally, I find parks a more apt spot because it opens an opportunity to have signs and to have a dialogue, to have information, to have all this. Streets do not allow for that. So I'm very glad that we have Sylvia Park, Labrador Park, and hopefully we can continue with that and start creating information for people to read. But I just wanted to throw that in. I am not married to Queen Street by any means. I will certainly support anything that my colleagues around the table come out with, but I just wanted to throw that in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Sanford, or Councillor Ernst. I do appreciate the historical context you put that in. And I recognize, I think instead of worrying about the UNESCO designation, when we're thinking about these streets, we should be more worried about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, right? Because this is the standard by which this council and this town will be judged going forward for generations. And I'll leave that. That's my last word on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mosher.
Once more to my chagrin, UNESCO becomes in part of the argument again. Here we go. What do we have for lunch tomorrow? Well, let's check it out with UNESCO. Okay, to move this forward, I think the reason we put this out to the general public was because we struggled with the same questions we have tonight. So I'm just gonna, shoot a bullet in the air here, and I'm gonna take the results that we had from the survey, and I'm gonna suggest that we approve Queen Street as the new name for Cornwallis Street, and then we can vote on it. And as I said before, whether the vote's positive, negative, that's, however it goes, it's gonna go here, and we're gonna either have to move on or start from scratch again.
Okay, so it's a motion on the floor. So before we have any discussion on that motion, we need a seconder on the motion, or the motion dies on the floor. So, and then we can discuss some other stuff, I guess, but we need a seconder on this motion to go any further. There is a seconder. Councilor Bertles seconds the motion. So now we can have some more discussion on this motion. Councilor Duggan, you had your hand up first.
Well, I think we should vote on Councillor Mosier's recommendation first, but then I have a recommendation as well once we've done that vote, if there's still time. So I don't know if we can vote for two different ones or if we have to do them separately.
Well, I think you can make a motion to amend the motion or something, because if you don't do that and Councillor Mosier's motion passes,
Right.
then we won't be discussing it any further, except for, I'm sure I will be in the media. But besides that, I think that if you want to make an amendment to the motion, you can make an amendment, then we need a seconder to the amendment. We have to see if the amendment passes and so on. So you're more than welcome to make an amendment to the motion, and if you want to.
Yeah, I would like to amend the motion to approve Sam Guan Street as the new name for Cornwallis Street.
We can have a second vote. Would that make sense?
Okay, let's move forward with Councillor Mosier's first, and then we can see what happens.
Okay, so if we have no other discussion, because we've discussed it quite length, we have a motion that's moved and seconded to rename Cornwallis Street to Queen Street. So we can now call for the motion. If the motion, I just want to make this clear here. If this motion passes, then we can't have another motion to call it something else. So all those in favor of Queen Street, raise your right hand. So I declare the motion carried with a 4-3 vote. Councillor Mosier, Councillor Bertles, Councillor Ernst, and myself voting in favor of Queen Street. So we now move on to 9.2 purchasing policy, and I'll ask the deputy mayor at this time to take the chair, and I'll go into the audience and sit for that.
Right. Sorry, I just need to pull my agenda back up. So purchasing policy. Draft motion, council repeal the current purchasing procedures policy and replace it with the new purchasing policies as presented. Do we have a staff presentation on that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This was before council at their last council meeting where there was a notice of motion, and we did a summary then, but I'll do a brief summary again this evening for folks. So staff have identified operational efficiencies that can be achieved if the limits of the limited value or small POs are changed to $2,500 plus HST from the current $750 plus HST. And if the request for quotes are changed to start at $5,000 plus HST versus the current policy of $2,000 plus HST. Staff also use this opportunity to bring the policy to our current policy standard, which included removing the procedural sections of the policy. And the other changes of note is removing the dollar amount for emergency purchases while leaving the requirement for reporting unchanged. So there was a notice of a motion for this at the last council meeting, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Do we have someone to move that motion? I see Councillor Duggan. Do we have a seconder? I will give that one to Councillor Mosier. Any discussion on the issue? Councillor Sanford, I see.
I would like to make an amendment to the motion. So I'm in favor of all of the aspects of the motion that are presented, with the exception of removing the limit for the CAO. What I would like to suggest is we keep the approval by the mayor and deputy mayor as opposed to the CAO requiring approval from all of council. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to everyone, or do we need some clarification from the CAO?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the feedback, Councillor Sanford. Unfortunately, I have a lot of experience in emergency purchasing, and typically the CAO does have usually a non-limit for emergency spending and things of natural disasters. In emergency purchasing, in this case, I don't think adding the approval of, or requiring the approval of the mayor and deputy mayor, I don't think it'd be too onerous. I can certainly reach any one of them at any given time of the day. So I don't think it'd be that onerous, and I certainly would be okay with the change. And I assume Finance Director Daley is also okay with the change.
Thank you, CAO Doyle, through the chair. I think it's a good practice, and I think it's in everybody's best interest, including CAO and council's best interest, to have Deputy Mayor Halverson and Mayor Myra to be able to sign off. And it was my expectation that CAO Doyle would have easy access to both mayor and deputy mayor at any given time. I'm sure they're all on speed dial, especially flood days. So I just think it's a positive step forward for everybody in checks and balances for folks, because at the end of the day, as council, we are responsible and for the budget and budget monies, and again, to the town and the townspeople. So the townspeople have elected the mayor and the councillors have elected the deputy mayor. So I think that we can move forward competently, that system should work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Sanford. I would just like a little clarification. Are you asking, Councillor Mosher, I just want to ask, are you asking that both CAO and, both mayor and deputy mayor sign off on emergency CAO spending, or just one or the other, whomever the CAO could reach?
I'm suggesting both.
Just want to be clear when we make the motion. Councillor Mosher, you got a question?
Yes, thank you. So these limits, you're comfortable with, this is going to be able to, fortify whatever you need to do as, to keep the town safe. Right. And I'm just, my issue with and I'm thinking where that might slide into the MGA is that, we're giving a mayor and a deputy mayor or specific people in council more power than council as a whole. And my, what I like about council is that we're all a unit and we all vote as a unit and no one speaks for the other. We speak for ourselves, and ultimately the mayor speaks on behalf of council, right? So that's the only thing I may have a little issue with, giving any one or two specific people on council more authority than another.
Through the chair to Councillor Mosher. That also sounds weird, by the way. In the emergency purchasing section, I think it would also be, I don't think it would be too hindersome to simply state that $10,000 would be at the council, but we could certainly go that way. I don't also think it's difficult to call a special meeting of council if we needed to make some sort of emergency spending. My only issue would then become if something was imminent. So if we did have another flash flood and we need to spend money immediately, then we may have to have a meeting incredibly quickly. There's always measures through emergency management to call a state of local emergency, which still would require some sign off certainly by council, but that would open the floodgates, all pun intended, for spending at a CAO level. So I think we'd certainly be covered. But it's really up to council what you're comfortable with. If you're all comfortable with you all speaking unified as unified voice, then certainly we'll leave it as it is. Anything spending over 10,000, if you want to increase the limit, you could certainly do that as well. It's really at your discretion, and I would certainly look to the finance director for any particular advice on that spending authority.
I actually was going to suggest that maybe it's not that the limit is removed entirely, but it may be that it's just an increase in the limit, if that was something council wanted to consider, that maybe it's 25,000 or 50 or something instead of the 10, because the 10 is quite restrictive.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm totally in favor of you having whatever resources you need at your fingertips, right? And we have the trust in the staff that you would do that responsibly. But I just don't see the need where we may, give a certain person on council more authority than what the body has in itself.
More comment from Councillor Sanford.
So through the chair, I just feel there needs to be some accountability there to council. So I think if we leave it as is and perhaps increase the limit to the finance director's point, I would be comfortable with that, but would like to hear what others think.
Any further comment?
I agree with that.
Councillor Duggan.
Do you have a recommended limit? I mean, what are we looking at as far as dollar amount?
I guess I would suggest at $100,000, like that's the amount that council awards tenders. So maybe we say the emergency spending limit is at $50,000, sort of half that amount.
That sounds reasonable. That was the number that I was thinking. So.
Any other comment? Councillor Birtles.
Thank you. I agree with the $50,000 limit.
Councillor Duggan.
Sorry, so I agree to the $50,000 limit. I think that having either the mayor or deputy mayor as a secondary, set of eyes to approve something like that would be sufficient. I guess I don't see the need for both. But again, it's up to the rest of council as well.
If I can interject.
If I may, Deputy Mayor,
Sure.
just,
Yeah.
so in the current policy, if we removed the dollar limit in the proposed policy entirely, right? And so we're saying if we return it, then it wouldn't require, well, unless council wanted to make it more restrictive than it already is, that the $50,000 amount would be at the CAO's authority. And then after that would require full council approval.
Right. I added that back in by accident. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If everyone's finished, wouldn't mind offering an opinion too. I like Councillor Sanford. I like the idea of the accountability, but to Councillor Mosier's point, I do feel at this point, if we imbue our CAO with the authority to spend up to $50,000, if that's the amount that we all decided, that is an action of council at this point. So we are at that point all agreeing that we have trust in our CAO, we have trust in our staff to handle an emergency. We give them the resources they need that they feel are required up to $50,000, and so that we're doing that now as a whole. So I do hesitate to think that in the midst of whatever may be happening, the CAO has to try and reach one of us. I mean, I look back to the recent storms, and I think it wasn't. We were out without power for a long time. We could be without cell service. It could be difficult to get somebody if he needs that money to do anything. I would rather that we have that trust and put that authority in our CAO. Anything greater than that, obviously we're going to have to reach out and deal with that as a council. But that's my 2 cents. If anyone else wants to chime in. Okay, seeing nothing. Now, if perhaps someone could refresh me, I think I've lost the stream here a little bit. I believe what we had talked about then is to move the motion as written without the conditions of the CEO and the deputy mayor and the mayor being signatories. But we were going to talk about increasing the limit to 50,000. Do I have that correct? Is that what we all understand?
So I believe, if I'm capturing it correctly, is that, so the motion was to repeal the current policy and replace it with the proposed policy, but there should be the amendment to the proposed policy to add back in the limit of emergency spending to $50,000 from the current 10, not requiring any additional sign off from the mayor or deputy mayor.
So we all understand? Okay, can we take that as a unanimous motion then? Okay, I see all nodding. We're going to continue that. No, okay, so do I have someone to move that motion? Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any more discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carried. Welcome back, Mayor Myra.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to 9.3, the Upper King Street ZZAP design concepts. There's a couple of draft motions here in front of you. The first one is just that council accepts the deliverables from ZZAP as the completion of the Upper King Street design project as was presented when they presented it. So is there anyone willing to make that motion? It's been moved by Councillor Moser, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Okay, so then the next motion is the council declare the lands of Upper King Street, including blah, 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 Upper Duke Street, north of Creighton, Upper King, north of Creighton, with the exception of first 42.5 beginning at Creighton Street, heading north, is shown on attachment F as surplus lands. And what that basically means, I was asked a question today at the beginning if we were going to have a public hearing on that, because that's sort of the next step. The public hearing would be if we were proposing any one of the 4 developments that were presented in front of us. At this point, we're proposing to basically do nothing at this point, but to move the land into surplus lands. So there won't be a public meeting after this meeting to discuss doing nothing. So if someone's prepared to make that motion, it'd be great. Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Moser. Any questions or discussions on that motion? Councillor Sanford.
So given the earlier discussion with regards to the presentations that we heard from community and discussions around the buffer zone, okay? Specifically, I'm looking back to when Linda Mills spoke about the loop. So I'm thinking Prince Street and Hobson. And I understand from Hillary, why we extended that to add that in. I'm struggling, having listened to Linda's concerns of us making a move forward now to move lands in a similar location as surplus lands. And so why would we extend one part off of Creighton Street and not extend the other lands in the same context? Like, why would we not look at them through the same lens?
I think isn't that part of the problem? Isn't the ZZAP area included the new buffer recommendations?
Through the chair, yes. Under the heritage plan and bylaw draft that we were discussing earlier, it is these lands, what we're referring to as the Upper King Street lands, are included in the transition area. These lands are also included within the UNESCO buffer zone.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Appreciate that.
Any other questions or concerns about this motion on the floor? Councillor Sanford?
Did anybody else have something? I mean, I don't want to Okay. I'm wondering if we are going to do, so I want to clearly understand the process. So my understanding is we're going to declare the lands surplus lands. So if that happens, if that's approved, do the lands then become saleable?
It's my understanding, yes, and it'd have to fall within the LPS, and yeah, they'd have to come back to this council. It would have to be public hearings on what they wanted to do, so the process would start over again. I guess what we're basically saying is nothing that we saw we liked, so we're moving it off the agenda and moving forward at this time. So I think that's what we're at, from what I understand in my meetings.
So my next question is, if we declare these lands surplus lands and they become saleable on the open market, is it possible, and if it is, at what point, is it possible to give first right of purchase to the residents whose properties border on those particular pieces of land? So as an example, when we talk about PID number 6005739, that property, that piece of land, is directly behind properties on Prince Street, being 109, 119, 125, 143, 151, and 159. So my thoughts are, could we offer to those property owners the first right to purchase at fair market value in a set period of time, the opportunity to buy that land that borders their property?
That question I can't answer, so I'll pass it over to the other Jamie sitting up here.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. And through the chair, we do have a pretty robust process to sell land. To be honest, I would have to get legal opinion on the legality of offering first right of refusal for public property. I do believe we would have to follow an open and transparent, fair process to divest of it. I'm not suggesting no, but there's certain circumstances where we couldn't use it and it wouldn't be usable by anybody else, those type of things that would allow us to circumvent that process, or if there was a non-solicited offer to purchase. So if somebody came to us and say, we want to buy this, we take it to council and make a decision that way. So if you allow us through that process to get some legal opinion, we can certainly do that. This process, by identifying it as surplus, just allows us to go to that step rather than having to come back to council to then identify it as surplus and then proceed to that step. So this is just another step in the process. It doesn't obligate us to do anything other than it's now identified as surplus land. So if something does come along, we can entertain it more quickly and more nimbly than we typically would. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Doyle. I have one more question, please. You can tell I've been spending a fair bit of time thinking about this. So this land is currently in the buffer zone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we are to declare the land surplus and we sell the land to whomever, is there, and I have a feeling you can't answer this, Hillary, is there any way that we can have any feedback, or have we received any feedback from Parks Canada at this point on declaring these lands surplus lands?
Through the chair, we have not received any feedback from Parks Canada regarding declaring these lands surplus. In terms of property regulation, heritage or otherwise, those are normally set out in bylaws, as you know, and are not necessarily dependent on ownership. So whether the town owns the land, if it's sold to someone else, they would still be subject to the Heritage Conservation Plan and bylaw if the transition area is extended and the land use bylaw. So that link between ownership, land ownership and protection that some people think of, normally Parks Canada and World Heritage Committees are more interested in the policy and legislative structure over them. So certainly I update Parks Canada on anything I think could potentially be of interest to them. I'll certainly keep them and have been keeping them updated on this project and will continue to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. So we're going to move on to new business. The first is 10.1, which is an accessibility quarterly update that we have in our report. It's just for information, I assume. Yep. Okay, and then we'll move on to 10.2, which is a draft motion there to waive fees for development projects by non-registered or by registered nonprofit and charitable organizations that are creating new residential units. First we'll get someone to make a motion, and then we can get staff to explain it. Or Councillor Sanford made the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ernst. So is there any discussion on the motion? Basically, it's making it easier for nonprofits to bring in housing units, which is the big thing we need right now in every community. So seeing no discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. That's really it. I'll ask for a motion to move in camera. So moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Sanford. We'll call a 10-minute recess. And again, I thank all of you.